Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we've got something incredibly fascinating to unpack. We're decoding the real complexities behind psychiatric diagnoses. Specifically, we're talking about anxiety and avoidant behaviors. But don't worry, we're not going to get bogged down in heavy medical jargon here. Instead, we are using these absolutely brilliant technology and system metaphors drawn straight from Dr. Masuda's psychiatric analysis. So if you're the kind of person who loves structure, clarity, and really seeing how the mind works on a visual level, you're going to absolutely love what we have lined up. Let's get right to it.
So, have you, or maybe someone you know, ever dealt with this incredibly common frustration? You go to one doctor, and they tell you, okay, you have an anxiety disorder. Then, maybe you move, you go to a new clinic, and suddenly they're calling it social anxiety. Visit a third doctor down the line, and they bring up avoidant personality disorder. It is so confusing, it leaves so many patients feeling totally lost, wondering, am I developing completely new illnesses here, or do these doctors just not know what they're talking about? It's a completely valid frustration to have.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this quote right here, it perfectly captures the reality of what's actually going on. Dr. Masuda points out that while medical textbooks love to draw these neat, perfectly distinct lines between conditions, actual clinical practice is way messier. Even when neuroscientists literally look inside the brain, they are seeing the exact same amygdala activation across all these different labels. Because the biological borders of these diagnoses are so fuzzy and surprisingly difficult to draw, the biggest takeaway right out of the gate is that we really shouldn't obsess over the exact name written on the chart.
Part 1. The triad of the mind: hardware, software, and environment. So if we aren't obsessing over the label itself, how should we look at the mind to, actually treat it? Well, to answer that, we need to break the mind down into a highly structured three-part system. And Dr. Masuda translates psychiatry into a language we all pretty much understand: technology. Think of the brain as your biological hardware. If your hardware is running way too hot, meaning you've got a brain that's genetically predisposed to feeling high anxiety, medications like SSRIs basically act as a biological cooling system to calm down that overly active amygdala. But what about the software? Your memories, especially past traumas or, say, a history of being bullied, those act as corrupted data within your system. And you can't just medicate bad code. That software literally requires debugging. And we do that through therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or psychoanalysis, which help you logically reorganize all that corrupted data.
But here is the catch. You can have perfectly optimized hardware, completely debugged software, and your system will still crash if you plug it into a toxic power source. And that brings us to our third pillar: the environment. High-pressure workplaces or continuous online negativity, like, say, getting hit with anonymous hate on social platforms, that stuff will trigger severe anxiety in anyone. And get this, even your immediate physical state counts as your environment. If your heart is racing and your breathing is super shallow, your brain automatically assumes you are in mortal danger. This is exactly why making environmental adjustments and mastering mindful breathing are just as valid and absolutely crucial as medication when it comes to treatment.
Part 2. Hidden triggers and comorbidities. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is
Social anxiety rarely operates in a vacuum. Let's peel back the layers here and look at what else is often running quietly in the background. Dr. Masuda highlights that patients often hide these comorbidities for years, literally years, before ever bringing them up to a therapist. For instance, someone might self-medicate with alcohol, which actually creates this nasty rebound effect where their body literally forgets how to relax while sober. Or there might be hidden PTSD from past abuse, which makes an intense fear of other human beings deeply, deeply ingrained. Then you have developmental challenges that can make society feel completely incomprehensible and just exhausting to navigate. Or body dysmorphia, which can cause immense social fear based entirely on perceived physical flaws. We really have to understand just how complex this web of anxiety can be if we're ever going to properly unravel it.
Part 3. Defining the intangible: personality disorders.
So how do psychiatrists actually separate standard anxiety or neuroses from a full-blown personality disorder? It actually comes down to one very specific, totally intangible skill: interpersonal functioning. Now, to be clear, this isn't about your IQ. It's a non-cognitive skill. And to explain this crucial concept, Dr. Masuda uses a highly specific geopolitical example to make it concrete. Look, it is incredibly easy to get along with people who share your exact values, right? But true interpersonal functioning is looking at a fierce adversary, like Putin or a hostile nation, and being able to objectively step back and say, I fundamentally disagree with what you are doing, I do not like it at all, but I can intellectually understand the historical background and the circumstances that drove you to make that decision. If a person completely lacks the ability to maintain that basic level of objective respect for someone they dislike, that points heavily toward a personality disorder.
Part 4. The climax, the AI model of anxiety.
And this brilliantly illustrates what is arguably the most important concept we're talking about today, because it shows how human behavior incredibly mimics modern machine learning. Think about it. You encounter a new stimulus, like a scary social interaction. You feel fear, so naturally you escape, you avoid it. But here is the critical part. Your brain records that escape as data. It literally tells your internal AI, hey, we ran away and we survived. Therefore, running away was the only option we had to survive. Your internal model then updates with this corrupted code, profoundly increasing your fear for the very next encounter. This loop literally teaches our brain to reinforce avoidant personality traits, or in extreme cases, severe social withdrawal like hikikomori.
But the beauty of this is that the solution is hidden right in the mechanics of the machine itself. Avoidance feeds your model with negative validation. But if you stand your ground, if you engage despite feeling that fear, and you find out the person you were talking to was actually quite nice, well, you just fed your internal AI model a highly successful positive data point. Over time, accumulating these hey, it's actually okay data points slowly but surely rewrites that corrupted code.
Part 5. Navigating human nature.
Now, actually gathering those positive data points, yeah, that's much easier said than done, because real-world human communication is messy, and Dr. Masuda definitely does not sugarcoat the rules here. First, you have to clearly differentiate between yourself and others. You must be fundamentally honest, saving your acting or those little white lies only for absolute emergencies. You also have to stubbornly negotiate to find compromises. And that last point on the list, it's a harsh truth about human instinct. Humans naturally seek out scapegoats due to deeply ingrained jealousy and subconscious drives. So if you find socializing exhausting and you just completely isolate yourself, you ironically make yourself a much bigger target for bullying. You have to stay in the mix, even when it feels really uncomfortable.
Part 6. The muscle training of the mind. So the crucial point is, where do we go from here? How do we actually fix the software and survive our environment? I want you to really let this quote sink in for a second. You already know enough. The rest is habituation. This is Dr. Masuda's ultimate tough love message to his patients. Because so often, people battling anxiety will read book after book after book, thinking they just seem to uncover one more psychological secret or one more hidden trauma, and then boom, they will finally be cured. But in reality, you already understand the mechanics perfectly. You know exactly how the AI model works now.
Intellectual understanding isn't the bottleneck anymore. Treatment is simply the grueling analog process of habituation. It is literally just like muscle training. You don't get stronger just by reading a book about weights, right? You actually have to lift them. You have to do this scary thing, the social interaction, the uncomfortable negotiation, tens of thousands of times. You have to stay right on the edge of your discomfort without breaking yourself, deliberately feeding that positive data into your brain, rep after rep, day after day, to completely rewrite that AI model.
So, knowing everything we've decoded today about your hardware, your software, and the negative loops of your mind's AI, how will you push through the discomfort today? I really want to empower you to go out there and take your first uncomfortable yet completely necessary rep in the real world right now. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I absolutely can't wait to see you next time.